Arnošt Czech Czechenherzu was a Czech poet and writer. He was born in 1878 in Prague, the son of František Czech Czechenherzu and his wife Emilia Lolova. He studied at gymnasiums in Třeboň and Prague, but did not finish his studies and began to work at the postal service in 1896. In 1902 he married Anna Valachova. Between 1909 and 1929 he worked at the Land Bank, before going into early retirement due to medical reasons. He began publishing in 1901, writing much on India in the 1930s, including novels in support of Indian independence. He died in 1951 in Prague. We will review two of his books. First is 1912 Cupid's Games of Life and Death. A grotesque concerns Hippolyte Vigant, a strange man and traveller in forbidden places, who would disappear one day and be thought lost forever before showing up out of nowhere. This time he had been missing for 2 years for the following reason. On the way to Provence he had met a woman on the road, her car somewhat of a mess. But before he had time to ask questions, he was mesmerized by her face and joined her inside. Next thing he knew, he awoke in the luxurious apartments of a 17th century marquise, his modern clothes gone, replaced by period high-born finery. The walls lined with 17th century paintings that seemed new, and above all a painting hung above the bed showing him in his new fancy attire, next to a woman who a cringing servant says is his wife. The lovely Margherita and the family doctor are both quite concerned about his references to the 20th century, cigars and democracy, so he plays along, never sure if he really did go back in time to the 17th century, but never let outside the mansion or garden to make sure. Finally, after 2 years, he scales and falls over the garden wall, and awakes in his modern clothes, his happiness lost to him forever. A romantic episode concerns a beautiful Indian woman who is brought to a quaint little Bohemian castle by Odon, the son of Baron Kurt, but who tires of her, abandons her, and makes her into a servant, so she dresses in her finery and sneaks into his bridal chamber on the day of his wedding and kills herself. The story of the lover who never was has Francesca, a wandering singer, taken as wife by the old Count Pietro, whose attention she despises. Trying to cheer her up, Pietro calls up a wise sage, but doesn't like what he tells him, so his devilish aide bores holes in the sage's ship and the whole crew drowns. Then the ginger-haired aide shows Francesca an old painting of an athletic youth she falls in love with and whose child she seems to bear, before she dies. Before the ginger-haired man throws poison at her corpse? A bit confused there. The Countess concerns the deformed man who is in love with the Countess, who just pities him when she sees him and throws him some pity alms, but then he gets trampled to death, saving her from her wild horses. The ocean has painter Jiří Marvan go to the ocean to paint, stealing the love of a fisherman's wife and shooting her husband when he tries to kill him. But he soon grows bored of her and abandons her, so she drowns herself where another woman drowned herself in the past. And then one day, years later, as he passes the same spot in a boat, he sees her face in the water, leans over and is dragged underground. The charcoal burner's willows concerns a man who was tempted to burn down his house with his wife inside, and then is thrown a noose to hang himself with. These stories are good, but the endings do become rather similar. We will also cover his 1916 Hetera, a mythical dream. Thetis, a hetera in the Temple of Aphrodite, sees a beautiful barbarian dragged through the temple in chains. So she poisons his captors and frees him. But because she was in his arms and let the sacred flame go out, Aphrodite says the temple and all the Hetera will go to ruin. Thetis wanders the earth for centuries, meets Jesus one time, is imprisoned for heresy, and then freed by the shade of the barbarian long dead. Then a painter who painted her as a Madonna is murdered by an angry mob. She sees a poet killed by a horrid phantom of his own design, meets Paul Valet just released from prison, hears Jesus have an argument with Epicurus, and then meeting a woman in a coffin in an old graveyard. Before awakening on the steps of her temple, her dream forgotten.